Okie doke, we'll go ahead and kick off. We took a little bit more of an untraditional path with this particular portion. We would rather not puke a demo if there's no desire to actually just see a demo that's not necessarily relevant to everyone's world. So we're going to hopefully just engage you all a little bit more. And then Dave and I will do improv based on your all's feedback and what would be most relevant to you. So if, with that being said, if you all want to chat, we can go two avenues. Avenue A, I can just give you a backdrop to kind of level set on what the Splunk technology is overall. And then we can go into specific questions. The second avenue would be just to have you all present topics and share topics that you want us to touch upon, and we'll go that direction instead. So if you want to just put in the chat window down here, which avenue you'd like to go, we'll go ahead and go that direction.
And if not, we'll start singing and quoting poetry.
It's all you, Dave.
Later, Dave.
Awesome. I think we're getting some feedback here, so this is good. It looks like predominantly we'll do a quick level set and go from there. So what we'll do is just start with a few slides, actually, not necessarily just the live interface. And based on the conversation today, we'll go in deeper into the specifics in our Slack channel later on to actually show you the interface if you'd like to see it in action. So awesome. I'll go ahead and get this teed up. All right. Awesome. Dave, can you see my screen?
Sorry, yes, I can. I keep muting myself.
Beautiful. Okay, excellent. Well, grab us if you don't see everything or are having trouble. To level set, there may be different understandings of the Splunk technology. At times, it's seen as like a monitoring tool from just when we first started to kind of like just this massive searcher of data, hence spelunking or Splunk it as the company name implies. And what has happened over time is it has gone from this tool that started out by being used by developers to just troubleshoot code and troubleshoot infrastructure issues at like Disney, a couple other companies like that long ago, to actually being a data to everything platform. And that really came a lot from customers and users like you all who just really pushed the technology to the limits because of its flexibility and ease, which we can go into in a moment here. It was because of you all, and we try to keep up with on the innovation side to really help bring the ability to answer questions, make decisions, take actions across the enterprise with your data. And that's really where it's come to. So we can explore a few examples here and then dive into specifics as we go. But really the overall objective is to make your data actionable. And when we say data for us is every type of data in any structure, any source, and at any time scale. But what Splunk is very good at is that unstructured data. So that data that you may have a difficult time getting access to, you may not know it's there, it's chatting from all sorts of places. And it's very difficult to get all of that data into one central spot and to actually correlate that data in ways that you would have never been able to do before, or that you would have been doing in silos. So looking at a certain system or a certain application or a certain technology tool and trying to knit all of that together. Splunk takes that away. It makes it very easy to put unstructured data to use. So about a year ago, on that note, we did a study and deemed the term dark data as all of that data within an organization that you can't get to, it hasn't been captured, you're not doing anything at all with it. And it may not be because you don't want to, it's just difficult to get there. And so we really are bringing light to that dark data. And here's a few examples. This is actually all the types of unstructured machine data that's around you to try to get access to. And Splunk makes it very easy to correlate that data, get it in one spot, and make use of it. So we really spread across 4 key buckets or areas of capability, and this just makes it easier for conversation. Splunk is kind of like a Swiss Army knife, so it's a blessing and a curse. But here's just a few examples for you all to see how entities are applying the technology. We like to push everyone's imagination though, so we'd love to see what the data doers out there are doing and highlight those two in really creative ways. So kind of to sum it all up, really the objective and what Splunk enables is the ability to ask that same set of data different questions. So a security team may be using and leveraging Splunk, but in actuality, that same data that they're using and collecting for their mission is applicable usually by about a 30 to 50% overlap for the IT operations and application and development teams. It's just that you're asking it different things. You need different things out of it. And that's really the beauty and the platform piece of the Splunk technology. Same thing goes when you're applying it to like a manufacturing space. You need some of that infrastructure data to also help make decisions and gain visibility within overall manufacturing operations, within machinery operations, et cetera. And so there's a lot of overlap with that. It's just the ability to actually be able to put that into one place. I can pause there. Do any questions that anyone may have? Okie doke. If you do, feel free to ping them on over. So this basically just simplifies the structure of the Splunk technology. So at the base layer, that's really where we take in and ingest structured and unstructured data, the machine data that's relevant to you and your line of work. We have the ability to deploy on premise, or we have a SaaS-based offering. And within that, we layer on top of that core Splunk technology a collection of applications, which I can show here shortly. It's kind of like the candy store for Splunk, and those integrations make it very easy to plug and play with other technologies and get data in that's useful to you all. Examples of that, we have a ton of plugins when it comes to AWS, have a tremendous amount of integrations when it comes to databases with particular infrastructure that are on-premise and traditional, a lot of factory and manufacturing line integrations, that sort of thing, application development tools. Usually it's there, somebody's developed it and vetted it out. So that sits on the core engine or the Splunk engine. And then we've wrapped that with machine learning and deep learning capabilities so that you don't have to necessarily be a data scientist like Mario was. And I'm sure many of you are out there, but actually if you don't have that necessarily, that skill set in-house, we actually have that built into the Splunk platform and technology. The idea being we don't really care where that data is coming from, no matter what the source, and we try to make it easy on everybody. We have one question here. Thanks, Caleb. Are those integrations mostly focused around data ingestion into Splunk? The focus on those integrations, Caleb, are to make it easy for you to get data from specific sources into Splunk. And then not just get that data in, but actually each application has wrapped in it specific visualizations, reports, dashboards, etc., that make it so that you don't have to go every single time and develop an application yourself that's relevant to your world. Most likely they're already out there, or it's a good starting point for you to then kind of build on top of that based on what's most important to you. Did that address the question? I'm happy to show you some examples here shortly too, Caleb. Perfect. Awesome. We'll go into a couple examples. If you, Caleb, have any in mind, I'm happy to, we can pull some of those up too, just to show you some real ones. The last component here, just to round everything out, is, so we talked about those specific competency areas that are buckets that we chunk use cases into. Those particular areas have premium applications dedicated to them, and those are just like applications on steroids. Basically, you have a whole lot of development work that we've placed into making it very easy to solve for security, to solve for PCI compliance, to solve for, as Dave can walk into a little bit later on, to solve for observability, and to solve for application monitoring at a very holistic level, to solve for IoT and predictive maintenance in the manufacturing line. And so there's a handful of those that sit on top of Splunk and are available to customers for those specific use cases. This will just really help net out too. I feel like sometimes data and cloud, all those terms are very broad. And so sometimes it's difficult to truly understand. And so when we look at the Splunk technology, there are 4 main areas that really tend to set it apart. The ability for it to take in that unstructured data at scale, as well as merge that with any structured data that you may already have in your environment, from business applications, from Power BI tools that you have like that in your environment. You don't have to worry about formatting. Splunk does that. It does the schema on the fly, we call it. And so there's no upfront formatting for that data, which makes it very easy and less cumbersome to get data into a place where you can work with it and extract insights. There's no backend database either with the Splunk technology. Again, going back to the schema on the fly. And then scalable, customers are ingesting petabytes of data a day. We have one specific transaction related company that processes transactions. They have 38 million transactions a day that we are processing with the Splunk and observability technology suite that we have in place. So it is very scalable. All right, I was just making sure we didn't have another question there. The last piece here is, this has been a really big push for us in the last year. We brought over a longtime Yahoo veteran who is very fanatically focused on making Splunk's platform very easy for developers, very easy for the application development community, because that's what was really close to his heart. He also is very passionate about bringing data to individuals that may not necessarily be sitting in front of a computer screen all day long, or that needs the data in their day-to-day job, whether that be out in the field with an electricity provider, or whether that be on the manufacturing floor, who's for an individual dedicated to a specific machine or part of that process. And so we've expanded the ability to get Splunk dashboards, visualization, and data on mobile in a very, very easy to use way. Porsche is an example, has been using augmented reality. So with their new Taycan electric vehicle, they are out in the field and are actually using Splunk visualizations to pop up a virtual like a user manual or user guide when they're actually at an electric station, charging station. And so it's right there in front of them rather than needing to be in front of a computer. And then of course the ability to go in between cloud and on-premise, we've made that interface very easy too. And then for Caleb, we can pop into the Splunk base and show you just some examples there before we open it up for questions. All right. So it's Caleb, and for everyone else who has questions, this is a really fun place to go. It's splunkbase.com, and this is really where you can go and type and look up anything that is relevant to your world from an application integration perspective. And you only need to have the core Splunk technology to have access to all of these applications. But there's a description of each of those applications, and then gives you examples of what you might get from that particular application. Another great one is our machine learning toolkit, which is basically a data scientist in your pocket. And there's a whole bunch of assistance and pre-built and capabilities here too. So you guys can explore that yourselves, but that just provides another example. I think we can pull up another sponsor too, just for kicks, but we don't really have any enemies. Try to make it very easy and friendly to get data in from any source. All right, I'm gonna pause there. That is the overview in a nutshell to level set with everybody. Any additional questions or thoughts? Feel free to post them in the chat. Okay. Oh, we got one in there maybe.
Curious what kind of storage.
Yep. Yeah, Caleb, there's definitely a baseline, especially if you're installing it on premise versus within our cloud offering. Obviously, if you go with the SaaS-based offering, it's a lot of the considerations there, and even administration, like about 75% worth of administration tasks go away. But for the on-premise offering, there is a baseline for the types of resources that are required, and happy to go through that separately. And then in addition to that, depending on how you are going to leverage the technology, the size of your environment, the amount of searching that you may be doing amongst your data, that really impacts whether or not we cluster. Oftentimes that is the direction that we recommend going, to cluster the environment in a specific way. I'll make a note to get in touch with you to go a little deeper too there. Thanks for the questions, Caleb. Anything else out there?
You got any questions at all for the Splunk team here? Now is a great time. It's like you get your own personal Splunk advocates ready to go.
Well, and we can have Dave go into some of the observability pieces too if needed here. Hey, Dave, thanks for the question about data archiving. There are a couple different ways to roll with that. We have a few different classifications, and a lot of it just depends on the requirements by the organization on how long they may need that data and access to that data, but we bucketize the data just based on requirements within each organization. And then there's also ways, especially actually in partnership with AWS, where we can also explore options that way from an archiving perspective, whether that be that organizations are doing it in a hybrid fashion or wanting to archive actually data and leverage the cloud for that.
Yeah. Another question came in, can this be applied to laboratory device output, something as simple as a balance or a complex as a mass spec device? And the answer there is absolutely yes. In fact, one of the advantages is that this system is capable of handling not only the standard type of human readable data, but machine readable data, and able to break it down by tags and dimensions so that you can analyze the pieces you want and find the data that's necessary to find inside of each of those pieces.
Perfect. Yep. So Tim, as long as the data is human readable as the general test, then it can be placed into Splunk. I'm not familiar with BioBright, Tim, but happy to look into it.
Yeah, I'm not either. I've never heard of that one, but it's now on my research list.
Yeah, thanks for teaching us. Awesome. And what else there, just from a foundational perspective, that would help you all? Well, as Calvin pointed out, and I'm happy to reshare this too in the Slack channels, from just given the current state right now, data actually is becoming even more and more top of mind. And so just to make sure that the right decisions are being made. So we do work closely with a lot of the main healthcare government agencies who are using it from an operations and security perspective. But then we've created real-time dashboards that you can all actually pull parts together and pieces out of the application and marry it with what you have in your world. That's on GitHub too. And so it'll give you a very good sense of the live real-time visualizations that occur and can be powered by Splunk. So happy to share that again.
Yep.
Tim, thanks for the additional context. We can certainly grab you later. I've made a note now too. I'm sure we can learn from you, and then happy to share examples with you too. We have a whole healthcare vertical that's very specific on data consumption there.
And it crosses into the IoT side, which is your machine analytics pieces.
Sure. Yeah, awesome. Yep. Thank you. Dave, would you like to touch upon anything? I think some of the questions have tapered a little bit here. I know you're going to be speaking tomorrow on observability in red, but is there anything that you'd like to show or that you think would be helpful to the audience?
Let me drop into and share my screen real quick for this. Sorry. Hopefully y'all can see the screen showing up here. And the first thing, since it was mentioned earlier, this is actually the code dashboard that we use. It is interactive. It's scraping data every minute across here. It has the ability to drop into them. And this is built from publicly accessible sources of data that cross all these different boundaries. And so there's a lot of different pieces inside of here, but pretty much because of the fact that we deal with data as data, we can display it in any way that makes sense for you to work with. So I'm part of what's called the app dev team here at Splunk. I work mostly in observability, and I work mostly at sort of the practitioner level, the SRE and DevOps level. And what I want to do is talk about something kind of near and dear, and I want to step into sort of a quick show of what's going on in sort of this observability space. Just because we're required, because I tend to occasionally get a little ahead of myself. I may make forward-looking statements. They are on our best plans, but as we all can pretty much sympathize with, our plans can change at any notice. So take with what I'm saying and check with us as you get closer to an environment. So we do cover the categories. Generally speaking, when you look at observability, there are the three things: the metrics, traces, logs. There's also a fourth thing which goes into controllability, which is how do you actually get it fixed, if you will. And those are the three things that sort of are the offerings inside of our observability environments today. We have signal effects from its infrastructure and APM monitoring. That includes the Omniscient distributed tracing. They're probably the world leaders in this. We have the Splunk Cloud for logs, and we have VictorOps for instance response. So with that, let me step into here. This is a simple demo. It's actually an e-commerce style demo. It's being brought in by an API. And as you can see, as I click on each of these pieces, I can get additional information from each of these sides all the way down. And I can see what's happening in a red environment. As Angela mentioned, and thank you, I'll be talking about how red applies in observability and microservices tomorrow as well. But you'll be able to see what your requests are, what your error rates are, what your durations are at various levels. So this is a very simple and clean way of taking a look at that. Stepping back, come on. Okay. This is the wonderful thing about working at home and sharing bandwidth with other people that are making use of the same system at the same time. For this. Okay, so let me step down here into catalog, and I'm going to go up and actually take a look at its dashboard. The dashboard comes up and populates, and again, I can see specifically to this microservice what's happening with the request functionality, how long things are taking inside of each of those pieces, as well as what the peak latency is. And this one is set over time, and I'm going to set it to 15 minutes. One of the advantages that we have here is that we actually don't need to go calculate. We pre-calculate the common settings that people look at so that they can actually simply click into this and then get immediate response. Our system is designed for real time. It's designed to show you the data basically as fast as possible to bring into here. Right now, for instance, I'm showing this one at 4 seconds coming across here, but these I'm showing at literally 1 second update rates for each of those pieces. But you can also go down and take a look at the other pieces inside of here. I can see that I'm running containers inside of here. I can look at an overall process count in here. And because it's a commonplace thing, what I'm going to do is issue a deploy. In a microservices-based environment, you don't usually update the entire environment. You usually only update a piece of the environment. So let me do a deploy. And that deploy is now going off and is going to actually run a canary across the system here. So let's see here. We have about 10 minutes, so I'm going to be pushing through this. No wonder it's not finding. I forgot to set the filter to look at what I've done. So I've done a canary push that's come across here. And over time, if you notice down here, I'm showing the process with containers. And while it's a little hard to see here, one of my containers is behaving poorly. And what's happened is that I'm beginning to start to see requests per second drop rather drastically. And over time, I'll start seeing other impacts. So you can see literally as soon as that canary got deployed, things started happening. And what happened was my system is smart enough to look at that I had an event happen and do an automated rollback. It literally rolls back to the previous known state. This is in process control terms, this is a closed loop functionality. You could also have this go out to an open loop functionality and have a person driving across that. So now I want to know what's caused this problem here. And I can start looking at this. I could, for instance, step into Splunk directly and look at the log functionalities that are there. I can step into investigate. I could look at what the runbook said to do about this for its rollback across that. But it's kind of interesting that I'm seeing two things. I'm still seeing the moving line of functionality, but I'm seeing a larger view plus a small view. And I can literally see what happened, that the threshold got crossed inside of that. So as an example, let's see, detector from chart, step through, and I'm gonna create an alert rule for this. So now I'm looking at my alerts and I can have lots of alert conditions here. I can have statics all the way down to a custom, but I'm gonna do a static threshold just because I wanna demonstrate something else inside of here. So I'm gonna say, I want the threshold to be above, 50. So 50 milliseconds here. And now I have a window that's showing me what would happen and that how many would it have triggered inside of that. So over a historical viewpoint, I can start seeing the line that I'm tracking, how many would be there. And just because I'm going to drill it down, I'm going to drop it down to 45. And all of a sudden you'll start seeing I'm getting a lot of potential errors that show up. So this is a quick way of being able to determine whether or not your alert is going to cause you an alert storm, that you can see what the impacts are going to be long before you actually have to implement this into a real-time environment. So rather than proceed to that, I'm going to just go ahead and discard that change in relation to the time activities that are going on. So in all of these different things here, let's step into traces and let me see if I can come up with traces. So this is actually the trace side of this. So duration is usually in the terms of trace. And I can see what happened with each of these traces. We are showing you and looking at every single trace that's going on. We examine every single trace. We make note of everything that outlies inside of this, and we give you the ability to always step back in and take a deeper look at anything that's going on inside of that. So literally I can show you each trace and its activity, what its overall relationship was. And for instance, this is a trace that took 19 seconds. And I want to see what it looked like against the historical space for this. And I can see quickly where my headache pieces are. And in both these cases, they seem to be related to this stock DB. So there's a problem with the stock database here. The stock database, when I bring it up here, I can see all of the different pieces of information that are going on here, how often it's being called, all the different pieces that are making up each of those pieces, where it came from, very quickly and easily. And interestingly enough, I can see what its query was that it passed. And I can find out, for instance, that somebody tried to load every single thing from the stock catalog instead of looking for the specific item. So within a very few seconds, literally, I've determined what the headache problems are, what the root problem is that's causing this to slow down, and being able to continue through in dealing with all those things. So Splunk comes with a whole group of standard dashboards for your infrastructure that are built in, standard capabilities for things like red metrics, standard capabilities for tracing and driving them down. It works with Kubernetes. It works with the Docker containers. So it works across all of the standard cloud platforms, as well as your on-premise environments, all the way down into your orchestration and delivery environments. And just as an example, this is our current Splunk environment. You can quickly see, for instance, there are greens and light greens and yellows and reds inside of here. But if I want to find out what's the population looks like across the deviation, I can quickly see which ones are acting out of normal. I can mouse over them and get more information for those across it. And I can literally step into that and see what its activities are at any given moment. So with that, we've got probably about 5 minutes left. So let me open it back up and see if there are any additional questions.
I want to take one last question. I think that would be good.
If there's nothing here, we will be hanging out in the Slack channel. So
actually, David had a question there in the chat about deploy markers.
You see people using deploy markers. Actually, the answer is yes. We are seeing more and more people use deploy as a marker, particularly in a microservices environment where you may see something get deployed that you have no idea what it is. Also in a microservices environment, a deployment of a service may cause an error to show up that has nothing to do with the service that's reporting the error. In fact, that demo that I just was stepping through, it points out the alert is actually triggering on the API where the problem is actually in the catalog microservice.
Awesome.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Angela.